Look, failing sucks, but you have an option in the moment of failure. You can accept the loss, or you can learn from it and get better. Hey leader, David Burkus here, organizational psychologist, author of 4 best-selling books on helping leaders and teams do their best work ever. And in this episode, we're gonna talk about how to learn from failure, really how to learn from success too, by running an after-action review. Most organizations don't really leverage failure as a learning opportunity, and that's a shame because failure is feedback, but only if it's digested the right way, if it's considered properly. And reflecting on, honestly, success or failure has a massive impact on whether or not somebody's growing and improving, and whether or not a whole team is growing and improving. In one study, participants who were asked to take 15 minutes at the end of every day and reflect on their successes and their failures and what lessons could be drawn from the day's tasks were 20% more productive than teams who just spent that extra 15 minutes a day working. I mean, think about that. That's almost an hour and a half of extra work time every week, and yet the people who took the time to reflect were more productive because they were growing and they were learning. There's 5 questions to ask in an after-action review, and we're gonna cover each one in turn. Let's get started. The first question to ask in an after-action review is, what was our intended result? In other words, when we started the project, what did we intend to do? What were the priorities? What were the ways in which we were going to define success? Now, ideally, we started this project with something like a team alignment meeting where we outlined exactly that. Here's what our priorities are, and here's our plan of action for achieving those priorities. So this really should just be a review of prior meetings that you and the team have had. Resist the temptation here, though, to add on to anything that was said before. What you want is to go back in time to the mentality and the mindset that your team had at the beginning of the project. What you don't want is for people to add on additional things that they thought might have been important that might explain what happened in the end, or to water down the ambition that they had for this project in order to make it look like, well, less of a failure, or honestly more of a success. We don't want to revise history here. We want to go back to the actual history of what was our intended result. The second question kind of goes along with the first in an after-action review is, what was the actual result? And this makes perfect sense, right? We want to outline what our intended result was, and then we want to talk about what actually happened. We'll go into why later, but just specifically what actually happened. Whatever metrics we were using to design our intended result, we're going to be comparing reality to those metrics. Maybe we came in over budget. Maybe we lost a client. Maybe we signed the client, but not for as much as we wanted. Whatever it is, whatever we said before, we want to talk about what the actual result is in a way where we can compare and contrast the two and see what the differences were. And by the way, this applies to successes as well. Even if we ended up overshooting our goal and had a way more successful project, we still want to take the time to look at the differences between success and failure, because that's going to help us out a lot in the third question. And the third question to ask in an after-action review is, well, a pretty obvious one if you think about the first 2. It's, why are they different? In other words, what things came along? What changed in the economic environment? What changed in terms of staffing? Maybe somebody quit. What changed in the client's demands? What happened that is the reason that our intentions and actions didn't produce the result we intended, but instead produced the reality that we're looking at? These reasons come in 2 forms, internal and external, right? Internal things might be ways in which we overestimated our abilities and we came up short on performance. Internal things might be the fact that we ended up having our budget cut. Internal things are anything inside the team and the organization that differed from when we committed to our course of action and stated our intention and now. External things are things that were in the external environment that didn't go the way we planned. Right? Maybe there was a massive amount of inflation. Maybe there was a great resignation. Whatever it was in the external environment that caused our plan to go off track, or I suppose in the case of a success, to go even further on track. I really don't know what the reverse of that metaphor is. Whatever in the external environment that we didn't foresee, or changes that happened that we didn't predict, we need to capture it here. It's okay that we didn't predict it. Well, I mean, it's not okay. We want to get better at our prediction, but we only do that if we can admit that we couldn't predict it. So now we have the compare and contrast between the intended result, the actual result, and we have the reasons for why it differed. Now it's time to think looking forward. Now it's time to start talking about the next project and the next project and the next project. And so the fourth question that we ask in an after action review is, what will we do the same next time? I know you thought I was gonna say, what are we doing differently? That's actually question 5. But I found when working with teams that it's actually better to reflect on successes first, right? We've already spent a lot of probably uncomfortable time talking about failures, talking about what we didn't foresee, talking about maybe whose fault it was, etc. And we've already tapped into a reserve of psychological safety on the team if we've had an honest conversation. And so what are we going to do the same next time is an opportunity to kind of shout our successes, to talk about the things we did right, to give props back to people who took the brave stance of admitting what they did wrong. And so I find it's best to focus on this. What worked that we're going to keep doing? What parts of the plan are not going to change? What will we do the same next time around? And the fifth and final question, I already said it, is what will we do differently next time? We can't do the same project. We can't work with a new client in exactly the same way. So we need to be thinking about what in our processes and our performance and our commitments to each other, what do we need to do differently moving forward? Maybe most of what caused our deviation from the intended result was external. And so the things that we need to do differently are adding on additional research in the economic environment, or maybe adding on little signals that we could pick up on that signal that a change is about to come. Maybe it is internal. Maybe we need to clear that we have extra budget before we head out. Maybe we need to make sure that everyone is clear on what their roles and responsibilities are and what the priorities are. Regardless of the situation, whether it was a failure or a success, we're gonna do things differently because we want to be doing them better. And this is the time that we capture that. Now, these last two questions are going to be huge in the future. Just like when you started the project, ideally you took down what do we intend in the moment that we're committing to the project and what are the course of actions that we're doing. You want the results of these two questions, really all of them, but specifically these two questions, captured so that you can refer back to it on the next client, the next project, whatever it is your team is taking on. We don't want to rely on people's memory here. One of the reasons we do the after action review immediately after the actions is that our memory is still fresh, but over time it will fade. Over time we'll misremember. Over time we might even see ourselves as individuals as a greater hero than we really were, and it'll be harder to get at the truth. So we want to make sure that all of these answers are captured right away, and we want to make sure that they're saved in a place where we can reference them untainted when we begin our next project. If we do that, then we can accurately grasp the lessons of past projects, failures or successes. If we do that, we can build a team that grows in their sense of trust and candor and psychological safety. And if we do that, we can continuously improve on every single project until we find ourselves leading or even just members of a team that can do its best work ever. Oh, and one more thing. These after-action reviews rely on a lot of psychological safety, a lot of candor, and a lot of trust. So they rely on a positive team culture. And if you don't feel like you have that on your team yet, you may not want to start with an after-action review. You might want to start building your culture. In that case, you're going to want to check out this video here on how to build a positive team culture. That one. Build that first, then do this.